Is he ready? Let me see if we're on first. We're on. Okay. Yep, we're on.
Hello, my name is Jimmy Moore, and I'm a proud member of the class of 2021, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm happy to introduce Professor Andy Goyke to present our last lecture at Northland College. Professor Andy Goyke is a professor of biology and has taught at Northland for 26 years. He has a passion for silent sports and enjoys fishing, swimming, biking, running, and skiing with his family. When asked what he enjoys most about being a professor, he responded that watching students grow and becoming a part of their lives is his favorite part about teaching at Northland. And grow we have. And without further ado, Professor Andy Goyke.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. A special greeting for some of you that I have not had in class since freshman year. Two, it's about time we're doing this again. Before we get started, it's been rumored that on occasion, when students say something especially witty or sarcastic that I wish I would have come up with, I may throw chalk at them. So, Stephanie?
Here's the thing. I also have chalk for you.
We couldn't help but do that one. Sorry, Todd. So if you've had more than one or two classes with me, and you think, probably heard everything he has to say already, Koosh, feel free to take a nap. Okay, I'll wake you up when it's done. For the rest of you, a couple of things before we get started. So this first part will not be on the exam. By the way, for those of you that have not had my exams, can someone describe what they are like? Okay, so just to let you know what you're in for. But this first part is not going to be on the exam. And just for the record, if this is indeed my last lecture, let it be noted that it took place in a gym. But the reason that we are here is to make the basketball kids and the volleyball kids feel comfortable. So Justine, Riley, this is for you, okay? That's why we're here. Well, we made it through the year. And I don't think that's the way we wanted to end this, is saying we made it through the year. I'm reminded of the line, the scene in Lord of the Rings where they're in the mines of Moria. And Frodo says, I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had ever happened. And Gandalf, with all his wisdom, says to Frodo, so do all of those who live to see such times. But that is not for us to decide. It is only for us to decide what to do with the time that is given to us. And I want to thank you for doing the most with this last year, with this time that was given us, and making the most of it, and sticking through it, and sticking with us, and learning and growing. So just thanks you guys for hanging in there and pulling it off with style. So thank you for that. Two things I learned after we went virtual last year. And I think I made a motion earlier today to remove the word virtual from the English language. But two things I learned after the world ended last March 13th. The first thing is we are made to learn and grow in community. And that you cannot virtual out. We're made to do this gig together. And last March, when we separated and we're trying to do it online, we're trying to cobble it together, we're made to be like this. We're made to do this together. And the second thing I realized is not only are we made to learn and grow together, but there is a necessary place for what Northland does. For this quirky little school that brings a mix of unique personalities together to do what it is that we do. So we need to do this together. And for some of us, I think we need to do it here. And one last thing before we get to the stuff that will be on the exam. We all want life to get back to normal. Get your COVID vaccine. It is just so beautifully illogical to hear people say, I want schools open, I want life back normal, I want everything back open, but I'm not going to get a vaccine. So you guys, roll up the sleeve. Okay, now we're going to get back to what we are meant to do today. And I'm going to start thousands and thousands of years ago, and it's a story you're probably familiar with, but if you're not, before the Exodus, Moses was out in the wilderness, and he was tending sheep for his father-in-law, Jethro. And you may be familiar with the story, and Moses is out there in the wilderness, and he hears God's voice from the burning bush. And God says to Moses, Moses, take off your shoes, for the place you're standing is holy ground. So what I'm going to do right now is to ask you to do the same. I am going to ask you to take off your shoes, and I will do the same. Because if this is indeed my last lecture, there's no thing I would rather do than do it barefoot. So God speaks to Moses from the burning bush and says, Moses, take off your shoes because the place you're standing is holy ground. And there's a lot of conjecture about why God said that to Moses. Now, part of it is your shoes separate you from the earth that God created. So one thing we do that when we take our shoes off is we remove that barrier. That's something that comes between us and the earth. Another thing, your shoes represent something that you made or that you made money to purchase. Your shoes represent the work of your hands. And maybe God was telling Moses, well, let's get rid of the work of your hands. Or maybe your shoes represent status. For those of you that are wearing the Airwalkers or the Uggs or whatever it might be, the Air Forces, whatever. Shoes represent status. And so maybe God is saying to Moses, remove that status. But what I think God was saying to Moses then is, Moses, you're out here in the wilderness tending sheep, and it's really rugged country. And so I want you to be a little bit uncomfortable. And I want you to think carefully about where it is that you step. So when we take our shoes off, we have to walk deliberately. And we have to think about those steps we're taking. And so all of that, I want you to be thinking about as we continue. Another reason for taking your shoes off, I hope it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. And you know how when you're given a talk, I know I'm a little uncomfortable up here, so that's okay. When you're given a talk, they say, imagine your audience is sitting there naked. But I knew Sean O'Connell was going to be here today, so I didn't want to go there. So I thought barefoot is as close as I want to get. Okay. So I'm going to talk tonight. This is called Walking a Mile in My Shoes. So I'm going to talk about shoes. My toy box at home is really a shoe box. And Maria asked me, are these all your shoes? It's like, not even close. When Sally, that's my wife Sally, sitting right there, by the way, in case. So when Sally and I were dating, and we'd start going places, we'd go to her parents' cottage or something. It's like, so how long are we going to be there, and what are we going to do? And she would say, well, how many pairs of shoes do you need to bring along? Well, let's see, running shoes and biking shoes, and we're going to be hanging out, so I need those. Probably 4 or 5 pairs. So shoes for everything that we do. So tonight we're going to walk a mile in my shoes. So I'm going to kind of run through, because each of these pairs of shoes have taught me a lesson. And so these, some of you that have me in class may recognize these. I wore these to class like every day in the winter. I like to think that they're simple, that they're elegant. You can argue that or not. But they're practical. And in the winter, every morning I get up and I put these on. I never have to worry about them starting. I don't have to scrape their windows. I put them on and I go. And so what these shoes have taught me is that sometimes simple is the best. And we can make things way too complicated. You've never heard that before from me, have you? Okay. My next pair of shoes, more or less. These are my swim fins. Okay, and some of you have heard this story back when we did aquatic inverts together. When I was an undergrad, I learned to scuba dive. And when I was starting my master's program, there was an opportunity to go to Arctic Alaska for someone that could scuba dive. And so because I had that skill, I got to spend a summer in the Arctic. I was diving every other day, collecting bugs, chasing fish around, schlepping equipment, doing all kinds of stuff. But I got to go to Alaska because I could scuba dive. So these shoes have taught me, learn skills. Because when you learn things, they will open up doors for you. And you want to be able to take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves. So this is taking advantage of opportunities. Okay, don't judge me. I wore these shoes the day I got married. 33 and a half years ago. Now, you are judging me, and you're judging my sense of fashion. But there's a problem with that. Because in order to judge my sense of fashion, we need to put these shoes into context. Like, what was going on in the movies in 1987, and the music, and what was going on in my life, and the circle of friends that I ran with. You know, what was going on that I developed such an incredible sense of fashion? And so is that my microphone hitting the collar? Should I change that? Asking my producer here. Thanks, Bob. So, you're judging these, and you know why you're judging these? Because we are terrible at putting history into context. And we're going to look at these, and we're going to think, well, I know what's going on in 2021, and so I'm going to judge what's going on in 1987 based on that. Not only are we terrible at putting history into context, Sally, who was a history major, said it was okay for me to say, we really suck at history. And not just putting stuff into context, but into history in general, like world history, and U.S. history, and the history of the civil rights movement, and the history of what happened in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. We just don't do good at history. So here's the place in this talk that I plead, or I grovel, or I beg, or something, that please read history and study history and know history so that when things happen, you can put it into context. Because if you haven't read George Orwell's 1984 lately, Orwell says, and this I'm going to have to read off my little thing here. Orwell says, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. The past is whatever the records and the memories agree upon. I'm glad nothing like that could ever happen here. So these shoes have taught me about history. These are my old track spikes. And my wife right now is thinking, why do you still have those? I wore these when I used to be fast, back in the day. But you know, that physical prowess is fleeting, but the stories remain forever. And they're usually pretty good. And so my high school track coach told me a lot of things that cannot be repeated in polite company. But my high school track coach told me, leave it on the track. Meaning when something big is coming, when something important is coming, when the big race is coming, or you've got the interview coming, or you've got the aquatic inverts lab exam coming, prepare. And do what needs to be done. And there's going to be distractions, and there's going to be things that get in your way. But as you're going to that big day, to that moment, do what needs to be done. So when that day comes, you can just let it rip. And don't be afraid of failure. And maybe more importantly, don't be afraid of success. Don't get in your own way. But these shoes have taught me to leave it on the track. I hope you all have a pair like these. So these, Sally bought me these when we were dating. So these are from 1986, and they have seen a lot of really cold days and a lot of snow. And back then, Sorels were really the only choice if you wanted good quality pack boots. You got more choices now. This was it. There's a bunch of lessons that come from me. The most important one is, if you are looking for a gift for that special someone that says, I love you, nothing says it like this. Okay, and of course I'll mention, well, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. Okay, we got that out of the way. So I wore these to the NFC Championship game that the Packers won in 1986 to go to the Super Bowl. And I did learn from that it is much warmer when your team is winning, because I also wore these in 2007 when the Packers lost the NFC Championship game. It was way colder when they lost. The last time I wore these this year was driving the snowmobile on the Ashland Hospital ski trails, because over the last couple years I've learned how to groom the ski trails here in town. Now, in case you haven't realized, I love cross-country skiing. And so I learned to groom the ski trails, and I've been putting in some time maintaining the ski trails, mowing them and brushing them, and now grooming them. By the way, there's something magical about laying down a groomed trail. It's just wonderful. But what these shoes have taught me recently is that doing something I love is much more meaningful if I've paid into making that happen. If I am part of making sure that continues to happen. So, volunteer. The next pair of shoes. So these are my bike shoes. And Tom Fitz isn't here, so I'll say it. What is the best way to get from here to there? What would Tom Fitz say? On your bike. So if I can't walk, my next choice to get from A to B is on my bike. How many of you think that way? Okay, a couple of you do, and I know you do, because you're at Northland, not by accident. How would the world look differently if we had to go somewhere and we think, oh, I'm going to walk is choice number one. A little far. I'm going to take my bike, choice number two. And then you get to choice number three, driving, and you say, well, that's a disappointment. I think we need that paradigm shift in transportation that says, there are different ways of doing these things than what we always think of. Because what these shoes have taught me is that sometimes how we get there is more important than where we get to. These are what ice skates used to look like. So these are my ice skates, in case you haven't figured that out. Yeah, they're probably circa early 1970s. Where I grew up, central Wisconsin, when I grew up, hockey wasn't a thing. But we skated. My brothers and I and my dad would go skating with us, and we would skate. And we would start skating on the lake as soon as it froze. And we had this game that we would play called rubber ice. And so what you do is you keep skating over the same area, and soon the ice starts going like this. And eventually, someone goes through. And so it was always, who's going to be the first one to go through? This will not be on the exam, but everybody should have the opportunity of falling through the ice at least once in their life. So if you haven't done that, you should. Okay. So I ice skate, but I don't ice skate very well. But I really enjoy it. And we adopted two boys about 12 years ago. 12 years ago? 12 years ago. And we started ice skating again. And when Dave and Ram were old enough, we bought them hockey sticks. And I got my first hockey stick like 7 years ago. And so I'm developing my puck skills. And just for the record, they are terrible. But it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy ice skating. I read a book after it came out, summer of 2018, called Range. It's by David Epstein. And the subtitle of that book is Why Generalists Succeed in a Specialized World. And what Epstein is writing is, it's not always the experts that solve the problems. Often it is the amateurs and the dabblers and those that are just interested in it as a hobby, because they're able to see things from a different perspective that the experts are blinded to. And when I ice skate, I think, well, this gives me a different perspective. So these shoes have taught me the value and the joy of being a dabbler and of having range. By the way, that sounds an awful lot like a liberal arts education. Okay, these next pair of shoes. So I wear these to teach in quite a bit. I consider these my work shoes. These are my dress shoes. Now, okay, they're an upgrade from my old running shoes. You guys have seen these and say, go back to, sense of fashion. Okay, you guys are there. Okay. So I wear these to work a lot, and they have enough support, enough cushion. I can stand in them all day. I can move around. I can walk up here. They're comfortable. So these are my work shoes. The president is here. So I shouldn't say this in front of him, but I'm going to anyway. Hey, you guys, work is not the most important thing in my life. I love my job. And more than I love my job, I really love being in class with you guys. But that doesn't define who I am. There's other things that are important, like God and my family and community and cross-country skiing. Do you know that the average work week in America is getting longer while the average work week in the rest of the world is getting shorter? We have to think about what is our relationship with work and how do we let that define us and control our lives. What these shoes have taught me is balance. These are my cross-country ski shoes. Yes, Lauren, they're a little bit old. Did I mention I really love cross-country skiing? So I've worn these to ski about 12 of the 22 American Birkebeiners that I've done. If you don't know the Birkie, the biggest cross-country ski race in North America. To be a skier is to be a person of hope. It starts in about the beginning of November. My kids might say it starts the end of August or so. Then I start hoping for snow. Because I know it's going to come. And I hope for snow, and finally that snow comes. And the first ski of the year is on snow where there's still grass and dirt sticking through, but I'm out there on snow. And then the ski year goes, and you have a nicely groomed ski trail. Did I mention that is just magical, being on that? The ski trail is magical because you build something that you know in a week or a month or a couple of months is going to disappear without a trace. But in the meantime, it is something really cool to use. So anyway, you go to the midwinter, and there's a groomed trail, and it's deep, and the track is firm. And then it goes to the end of the year, where the snow is getting slushy, but there's still hope that next year, I'm going to do it again. And I think it's that ephemeral nature of skiing that is kind of the beauty to it. But what is the future of snow and of winter and of things like the Birkie? What's going to happen with that? Late in his life, Sigurd Olsen said in an interview, "Young people come to me and ask, 'What is your hope for the world?' And I always answer that the hope for the world is you. You are the next generation. I am the old generation. Just like this little tree here," and he's standing outside next to a little tree. This is a sapling. Right beside it is one of those enormous red pines. This sapling epitomizes you and the hope of the world. So I have hope for winter and for snow and for things skiing, but more importantly, I have hope for you. You are the saplings, and you have the knowledge, but more importantly, I think your generation has the will to do something my generation has not been able to accomplish. And that's to actually look for 21st century solutions to our problems, instead of turning to 18th century solutions like oil and coal. And I think you guys are the ones to make that happen. And you saplings give me hope. And so these shoes have taught me hope. And I know y'all have a pair like these in your closet, you know, your mud boots. I call these my science shoes or my biology boots. Okay, these are, well, not these in particular because I've gone through 4 or 5 pairs already in my career. But these are the shoes that I go to do science. When I was up in Alaska trudging across the tundra, or when I was studying walleye populations in the ceded territory, or when I was leaning over the rail on the boat on Chesapeake Bay. Okay, did you get leaning over the rail part there? Okay. I like to say I've thrown up on all the Great Lakes. I've missed Lake Huron, but I'm working on it. I've done a lot of work on boats. I get seasick. Okay. I wore these for class. Ellie, aquatic inverts. I was wearing these, right? Yeah, okay. I thought that happened. So these are the shoes that I used to do science. And you know what we do in science? We collect facts. We go out and we count things, and we weigh things, and we measure things, and we identify things. At least that's what we do in biology, you know, but we collect the facts. And so you guys have all done that, or at least many of you have, and you've counted things and weighed things and measured things and identified things. And then you take a class with Derek Ogle so you can learn how to make sense of all the stuff that you've weighed and counted and measured and identified. Okay. Remember the good old days? The good old days when we actually accepted facts? There's an old quote by the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And Moynihan says, "Everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but they are not entitled to their own facts." Well, what Moynihan said in the 1970s is no longer true. Now people say they are entitled to their own facts, and we call it like fake news or alternative facts, or we do something like that, and we say, well, no, if that's what you believe, it must be true. But I don't think so. The planet doesn't care if you believe in climate change or not. It's getting warmer. And the microbes don't care if you believe in vaccines or not. They work. And no matter how many people repeat a lie, that does not make it true. And no matter how many people say the emperor is finely dressed, we need to have the courage to say the emperor's wearing no clothes. These shoes have taught me the reality of facts. And then we get to my running shoes. Don't worry, I didn't run in these ones this morning. They may smell funky, but it's an old funk, not a fresh funk. So you're okay. So my running shoes. I run 3 or 4 times a week. So that ends up being almost every other day I'm going to go out for a run. And I've run, I counted the other day, I think I've run in 22 of the US states. And I've run in DC. I've run in big cities like Atlanta. I've run in DC. I've run in rural places. I've run in remote places. But except for thinking about bears, I have never gone on a run and been worried about being assaulted or worse. It was just over a year ago that we learned the name Ahmaud Arbery, a young black man who went out for a run like I do 3 or 4 times a week, and a man who was chased down and killed for running while being black. There's been a lot of talk about patriotism thrown around over the last few years. And I'm going to include my definition in that here today. My definition of a true patriot is one who lives this line from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I will never know what it is like to run in Ahmaud Arbery's shoes. And there are parts of our society that do not want people like Ahmaud Arbery or my 2 black sons to be able to walk in my shoes. We are failing to live up to our calling as Americans, to live up to our calling as humans, until everyone can go for a walk or a run, regardless of color or gender or immigration status or their last name or where they come from. Okay. We are failing until everyone can go for a walk or can go for a run without fear of assault or harassment or abuse or worse. These shoes are teaching me about justice. And there's one last pair of shoes. Well, there's actually two final pairs of shoes. These are the ones I wore here today. These are my summer shoes. I know some of you, they're your all-season shoes. I get that, okay? Yeah, I know. So I wear these in the summer when I can't get around going barefoot. And it's kind of funny that I have all these shoes, but most often I like to go barefoot. So these shoes I wore to Remy Orr's first class at Northland College, 8 a.m. freshman bio. And these shoes I wore to Remy's last class at Northland College, aquatic inverts, yesterday. You know, our relationship here is one of coming and going. We know that we're going to be together 4 years. And so I think about relationships when I wear these. Because we know you're only going to be here 4 years. But we do grow quite fond of you over that time. Yes, Remy, you too. And we're sad to see you leave. And when a class leaves, I don't know about my colleagues, but I know I feel in my heart, how will the next class be that comes in the fall? Will I be able to develop that same kind of affection toward them? And it's not that my affinity for you lessens at all over time, but it's that my heart grows so that there's more room for more people. And that's an interesting thing. So these are my summer shoes, my relationship shoes. I've coached baseball in these shoes, and I've coached soccer in these shoes, and I've coached track in these shoes. I wear them to picnics, and I wear them to the beach. I wore these shoes 2 years ago when I went to the hospital to meet my granddaughter Quinn for the very first time. I wore these shoes 3 years ago when I said goodbye to my father for the very last time. Relationships, they're comings and goings. I wore these shoes last year to the racial justice protest we had here in Ashland. Some of you may have been there. And I wore these shoes a week later when I sat across the table from a man that I knew for 20 years. And he bared his teeth and he pounded his fist and he screamed at me, there is no such thing as systemic racism. And I wore these shoes as I walked away. Relationships, they're painful and they're joyful. And they begin, and sometimes friendships end. But through it all, through the pain and the endings, come the joy and the beginnings. I didn't tell you that I met my wife ice skating. And I told her that day that I was going to be a hermit. Now, not only was that true at the time, I didn't realize till later what a great pickup line that was. But this comes from a guy who had a career aspiration of being a hermit. Okay, through the joys and the pains of relationships, they are the most important things in life. Those are the things that you're going to carry with you. So these shoes have taught me about relationships. And then there's one last pair of shoes, and they're the ones you're wearing right now, and they're these ones. When you go barefoot, it's hard to hide anything. These are the shoes I wear to be real. Just like Moses at the burning bush, when we go barefoot, We've removed from ourselves our status and things that we have created. And it forces us to think deliberately about where that next step is going. And we need to walk slowly. Think about how different the world would be if everybody went around barefoot. You know, we all become a bunch of hobbits. But think how different the world would be. Think what that would mean for war, for policing and for protesting, if we all went around barefoot. Aldo Leopold wrote in Sand County Almanac, when some remote ancestor of ours invented the shovel, he became a giver. He could plant a tree. And when the axe was invented, he became a taker. He could chop it down. I'm going to steal that idea, but I'm going to apply it to shoes. When you get up in the morning and you lace them on, you put on your shoes. Usually it's because you're going somewhere or you're doing something. So when you put on your shoes because you're going somewhere or you're doing something, think about your options. Leopold just gave us two. Regardless of the shoes you wear, where you're going or what you're going to be doing, you can put on your shoes and you can go out as a giver, consciously making the lives of those around you better, making the planet healthier, giving a hand to lift someone up, taking a knee in reverence, or maybe even in protest. Or you can put on your shoes and you can go out and you can do it as a taker, not worrying about those around you or the health of the planet, using your hand to knock someone down instead of lifting them up, kneeling on someone's neck. You have the power to plant or to chop, to sow or to reap. And as a graduate of Northland and a citizen of this planet, I think that is power for you to use responsibly. So we started in the Old Testament, and I'm going to finish in the Old Testament. And the context here is that the prophet Micah is having a conversation with God. And Micah realizes his sinfulness, and he comes to God and he says, so what is required of me as an offering? Do you want from me 1,000 bulls? Do you want from me my firstborn child? And God says to Micah, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And really, I think it's that simple. Your actions, act justly. Bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. And your attitudes, love mercy, show compassion, offer forgiveness. And finally, your accomplishments. The prophet Micah says, walk humbly. No matter what shoes you're wearing, what you're going out to do, walk humbly. And when you leave those footsteps behind you, may those footsteps show lives that you have touched for the better. And that's my prayer for you, is that you will act justly, and you will love mercy, and you will walk humbly with your God. Hey, you guys, I love you. Be well. And what do I say every Friday? No, I'll turn this back on. So what do I tell you every Friday when class is getting done? So what was that, Natalie? Don't do anything stupid tonight, okay?